Romance fraud has evolved into a sophisticated global criminal enterprise generating billions annually. Between 2021 to 2025, coordinated international operations targeted these networks. Operation Contender focused on African syndicates with 260 arrests across 14 nations. Operation First Light coordinated 61 countries, resulting in 3,950 arrests and $257 million seized. Operation HEACHI targeted Asian networks, achieving 5,500 arrests with $400 million recovered. The FBI reported $16.6 billion in losses from internet scams in 2024, with romance fraud being a major component. Interpol estimates billions more go unreported due to victim shame. Criminals in West Africa, particularly Ghana, Nigeria, Côte d'Ivoire, and Senegal, operate sophisticated networks using social engineering, AI-generated content, and complex money laundering. The crime targets emotional vulnerabilities through fake online identities on dating sites and social media. Once trust is established, criminals manipulate victims into sending money for fabricated emergencies. Organizations employ specialized roles: scriptwriters, fraudsters, managing multiple personas, money mules, and launderers. Investigation challenges include transnational nature, encrypted communications, cryptocurrency, and differing legal systems. Despite this, Interpol's African Joint Operation Against Cybercrime (AFJOC) and tools like Global Rapid Intervention of Payments (IGRIP) enabled success. Ghana's extradition of 3 nationals in August 2025 to face U.S. prosecution for stealing $100+ million marked significant progress. However, the industry continues thriving. Economic incentives remain powerful, with high unemployment in developing nations producing willing fraudsters, while aging populations in wealthy countries provide endless victims. This report examines operations from investigations through prosecutions, exploring methods used by criminals and investigators, international cooperation, and ongoing challenges. The internet transformed romance fraud from rare crime into global epidemic. Interpol data shows 2.8 million identified victims between 2020 to 2025, with losses exceeding $20 billion. Actual figures are likely far higher, as shame prevents reporting. In the United States, the FTC reported $1.3 billion lost to romance scams in 2023 alone, a 25% increase. FBI data shows individuals over 60 represent 40% of cases, but suffer disproportionately higher losses, often entire retirement savings. The UK's Action Fraud received 8,000 reports in 2024, with £95 million, $120 million in losses, though authorities estimate only 1 in 7 victims reported. Europe saw exponential growth, with Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and Netherlands reporting dramatic increases. In many European nations, romance fraud surpassed traditional theft in financial impact. Europol designated it a priority crime area. Asia developed unique characteristics, with Japan, South Korea, and China reporting thousands of cases, often involving cryptocurrency investment schemes called pig butchering. Victim demographics challenge stereotypes. While elderly widows and widowers suffer largest individual losses, victims include all ages, genders, and education levels: doctors, lawyers, executives, academics, and law enforcement. The common thread is human vulnerability, not ignorance. Women represent 60% of victims, though men increasingly targeted and suffer larger losses but report less due to stigma. Psychological impact often exceeds financial devastation. Victims describe PTSD-like symptoms, depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. Unlike property crimes, romance fraud involves trust betrayal and intimate emotional connection violation. Many blame themselves, leading to long-term psychological harm. COVID-19 dramatically accelerated growth. Lockdowns drove millions to online dating, with platforms reporting 50 to 100% user growth during 2020 to 2021. This created unprecedented opportunities for fraudsters exploiting isolation and emotional vulnerability. Romance fraud also serves as gateway to other crimes, with victims becoming unwitting money mules or targets for identity theft. Economic impact extends beyond direct losses. Financial institutions spend billions on fraud detection. Law enforcement diverts substantial resources. Healthcare systems treat psychological trauma. Overall economic toll exceeds $30 billion globally per year. West Africa became the epicenter due to youth unemployment, internet access, cultural normalization of scamming, insufficient law enforcement, and low prosecution risk. Geography is evolving. Southeast Asia, particularly Cambodia, Thailand, and Myanmar, saw growing operations where human trafficking victims are forced to operate scams. Eastern Europe, including Ukraine, Russia, and Moldova, emerged as sources. Technological sophistication grew dramatically from crude attempts to professional operations, employing AI-generated images, voice synthesis, and deepfake videos. Romance fraud follows predictable patterns refined through years. Phase 1 is target identification. Organizations maintain victim databases from purchased mailing list data, breaches, social media scraping, and platform insiders. They analyze targets for vulnerability. Recently widowed, divorced, posting about loneliness, minimal social connections, and financial resources indicators. Criminals create fake identities appealing to victims. They select or generate photographs matching victim preferences, often stealing from military personnel, oil rig workers, doctors, or engineers, providing plausible explanations for inability to meet. Advanced operations use AI-generated faces impossible to verify through reverse image searches. Initial contact occurs via dating sites, Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Messages are carefully crafted, appearing personal and specific, referencing profile details. Fraudsters present success, sophistication, and availability, seeming too good to be true because they are. Phase 2 builds trust over weeks or months. Criminals communicate frequently via text, email, and sometimes calls or video chats using voice changing or deepfake technology. They employ love bombing with overwhelming affection, mirroring victim interests and values, sharing fabricated stories eliciting sympathy, and creating shared futures discussing marriage and growing old together. This creates powerful emotional bonds. Phase 3 introduces crises requiring financial assistance. Scenarios include medical emergencies, legal troubles like taxes or customs fees, business opportunities, travel, complications, or military deployment issues. Initial requests are small, few $100s, testing willingness and establishing patterns that escalate. Phase 4 involves escalation and extraction. Once victims send money, demands become more frequent and larger. Fraudsters create urgency through manufactured crises. They use wire transfers, cryptocurrency, gift cards, or bank transfers to money mule accounts, making tracing difficult. Some operations involve sophisticated investment fraud, combining romance scams with fake cryptocurrency or forex platforms. These pig butchering scams show victims impressive initial returns, encouraging larger investments before revealing platforms are fake. Victims lose hundreds of thousands or millions. Final phase is abandonment or transition. Criminals either disappear completely or attempt final large extractions. Some victims transition into money mule roles, told they can recover losses by receiving and forwarding funds, unwittingly becoming money laundering participants. Throughout all phases, fraudsters use sophisticated psychological manipulation, isolating victims from friends and family, creating dependence through constant communication, using intermittent reinforcement alternating between affection and crises, and exploiting sunk cost fallacy where victims send more hoping for returns. This sophistication explains why intelligent people become victims and highlights why comprehensive prevention requires more than warnings. The criminal networks, romance fraud operations are sophisticated networks with hierarchical structures and specialized roles. The epicenter is West Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal. Due to youth unemployment, internet access, cultural factors viewing scamming as acceptable wealth redistribution, insufficient law enforcement, corruption, and distance from victims. Operations concentrate in major cities: Accra and Kumasi in Ghana, Lagos in Nigeria, Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire. Criminals work from cybercafes, call centers, or converted apartments with multiple computers and phones, enabling simultaneous management of dozens of victim relationships. Organizations follow hierarchies. Kingpins organize operations, provide capital, and manage logistics. They rarely communicate with victims and often have legitimate business fronts. Managers oversee teams, coordinate fraudsters, handle recruitment, training, and manage money laundering. They interface between fraudsters and leadership. Frontline workers are Yahoo boys who directly communicate with victims, managing 10 to 50 plus relationships simultaneously. Scriptwriters create templates and narratives designed to elicit specific emotional responses. The best scripts are sold within criminal networks. Technical specialists create fake profiles, generate photographs, maintain VPNs hiding locations, and set up fake investment platforms. Money mules receive stolen funds and transfer them onward. Some are witting accomplices paid for services. Others are unwitting victims recruited through fake jobs or romance scams. Money launderers convert proceeds into legitimate assets: real estate, luxury vehicles, jewelry, businesses. Sophisticated operations involve multiple jurisdictions and complex corporate structures. Organizational culture varies from tightly controlled hierarchies to loose networks. Yahoo Boy culture includes its own slang, status symbols, and social media presence, with successful fraudsters flaunting wealth and attracting recruits. Networks show remarkable adaptability, quickly shifting tactics when methods become known or enforcement increases. International connections enable global operations. West African networks partner with counterparts in Asia, Eastern Europe, and Latin America, enabling multi-country targeting and diversified risk. Economics are compelling, where average income is $200 to $500 monthly. Successful fraudsters earn thousands or tens of thousands monthly. For young people with limited legitimate opportunities, this seems economically rational. Some organizations developed brands within criminal communities, known for particular fraud types or sophisticated operations. Violence is relatively rare compared to other organized crime, but exists in disputes or against informants. Understanding these structures was crucial to law enforcement. Targeting only street-level fraudsters achieves limited impact as they're quickly replaced. Focusing on kingpins, money laundering, and infrastructure providers achieves lasting damage. Operation Contender 2024-2025. Operation Contender represented one of the most comprehensive African cybercrime crackdowns, coordinated by Interpol's African Joint Operation Against Cybercrime, AFJOC. The third phase, conducted in July-August 2025, involved 14 African countries and specifically targeted romance fraud and business email compromise networks. The operation resulted in 260 arrests across participating nations including Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, Cameroon, Kenya, and South Africa. Law enforcement seized computers, phones, bank account information, and evidence of millions in stolen funds. The operation also identified thousands of potential victims globally. Planning began months earlier with intelligence sharing between African nations facilitated by Interpol. Investigators identified major criminal organizations, their leadership structures, and operational methods. They traced money flows, identified money mule networks, and coordinated simultaneous raids to prevent criminals from warning each other. Ghana played a central role, with authorities arresting 78 suspects in coordinated operations across Accra, Kumasi, and other cities. Ghanaian police raided cybercafes and residences, seizing equipment used to defraud victims in the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and throughout Europe. Many arrested individuals were found managing relationships with 20 to 50 victims simultaneously. Nigeria's contribution was equally significant, with 64 arrests primarily in Lagos. Nigerian authorities targeted both romance fraud operations and business email compromise networks, which often operated from the same locations using similar techniques. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, coordinated Nigerian efforts, building on years of experience combating cyber-enabled fraud. Senegal arrested 42 suspects in operations coordinated with French law enforcement, reflecting former colonial connections and ongoing cooperation. Senegalese operations focused on francophone fraud networks targeting French, Belgian, and Swiss victims. Investigators found evidence of coordination with European-based money laundering networks. The operation revealed increasing sophistication in African cybercrime. Criminals were using advanced technical infrastructure including VPNs, encrypted communications, and cryptocurrency wallets. They employed professional translators ensuring communications with victims appeared natural. Some operations had dedicated quality control personnel reviewing messages before sending. Money laundering networks proved extensive. Investigators traced funds flowing through multiple African countries before being converted to cryptocurrency or transferred to Asian banking havens. Some organizations had established seemingly legitimate businesses, import-export companies, currency exchanges, real estate agencies, to launder proceeds. Victim impact was devastating. Evidence seized included communications with elderly victims who had lost life savings, retirees convinced to liquidate retirement accounts, and individuals who had taken out loans or mortgages to send money to supposed romantic partners. Some victims had been sending money for years, convinced they were helping real people they loved. Post-arrest investigations revealed criminal lifestyle contrasts. While victims struggled with financial ruin, arrested fraudsters had purchased luxury vehicles, built expensive homes, and lived lavishly. Social media posts showed them flaunting wealth, wearing designer clothes, and celebrating successful skills, attracting more young people to criminal activity. The operation demonstrated both successes and limitations. While 260 arrests represented significant disruption, the underlying criminal ecosystem remained intact. New recruits quickly replaced arrested individuals. Economic incentives remained powerful. However, the operation raised prosecution risk awareness and demonstrated international commitment to combating African cybercrime, potentially deterring some would-be fraudsters. Operation First Light 2022-024. Operation First Light stands as one of the largest coordinated international law enforcement operations against romance fraud, involving 61 countries across Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, and South America. Conducted between 2022 to 2024 with intensified phases, it resulted in 3,950 arrests and the seizure of $257 million in criminal proceeds. Interpol coordinated the operation through its Financial Crimes Unit, facilitating intelligence, sharing, and coordinated tactical responses. The operation specifically targeted romance fraud networks, business email compromise schemes, and associated money laundering operations. It represented unprecedented global cooperation against cyber-enabled fraud. The operation's scope was remarkable. In Africa, 34 countries participated, with major enforcement actions in Ghana, 487 arrests, Nigeria, 612 arrests, Côte d'Ivoire, 143 arrests, Senegal, 98 arrests, Kenya, 87 arrests, and South Africa, 156 arrests. These arrests targeted both street-level fraudsters and organizational leadership. European participation involved 19 countries with 892 total arrests. The United Kingdom contributed significantly with 234 arrests, primarily targeting money laundering networks receiving proceeds from African-based fraud operations. British authorities identified and arrested money mules, unlicensed money transmitters, and individuals operating shell companies for laundering purposes. Spain arrested 127 individuals involved in receiving and forwarding stolen funds, while France arrested 98. Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Belgium, and other European nations made dozens of arrests each. European operations revealed that many arrested individuals were themselves immigrants from Africa or Eastern Europe, recruited through promises of legitimate work but compelled into criminal activity. Asian participation included 8 countries with 543 arrests. Malaysia arrested 176 suspects involved in receiving funds and converting them to cryptocurrency. Thailand and Philippines also made significant arrests, revealing that Southeast Asian criminal networks increasingly collaborated with African organizations. Some victims in Asia were being targeted by romance frauds while others served as money mules. North American operations saw Canada arrest 89 individuals and the United States arrest 67, primarily money mules and money laundering facilitators. U.S. arrests included individuals operating unlicensed money transmission businesses, cryptocurrency exchangers, and wire transfer agents who knowingly processed fraud proceeds. Many arrested were recent immigrants from countries where romance fraud is prevalent. The $257 million seizure represented one of the largest financial recoveries from romance fraud operations. Assets seized included bank account balances, cryptocurrency wallets, real estate properties, luxury vehicles, jewelry, and cash. Some seizures occurred moments before funds were transferred onward, prevented through Interpol's iGrip system, enabling rapid account freezing investigation techniques employed in Operation First Light were sophisticated. Digital forensics teams analyzed seized computers and phones, recovering deleted messages, identifying victims, and tracing money flows. Financial intelligence units tracked wire transfers through multiple jurisdictions. Undercover operations involved law enforcement posing as victims to gather evidence and identify criminals. The operation revealed disturbing trends. Criminals increasingly used AI-generated photographs and deepfake technology, making victim verification of supposed romantic partners' identities nearly impossible. Professional scriptwriters created psychologically sophisticated narratives tailored to specific victim demographics. Some organizations employed former psychologists or counselors who understood emotional manipulation. Post-operation analysis showed both impact and limitations. Short-term disruption was significant, with many criminal operations temporarily ceasing. However, within months, new operations emerged. The decentralized nature of romance fraud networks meant that removing individuals from one location simply shifted operations to another. The fundamental economic drivers, unemployment and wealth disparity, remained unaddressed. Despite limitations, Operation First Light demonstrated what international cooperation can achieve. The operation recovered funds for hundreds of victims, prevented ongoing victimization of thousands more, and raised awareness globally about romance fraud. It established protocols for future international operations and strengthened relationships between law enforcement agencies worldwide. Operation HEACHI 2024. Operation HEACHI, conducted in 2024, represented the fifth phase of Interpol's operations targeting financial crimes across the Asia-Pacific region. While broader in scope than romance fraud alone, it achieved remarkable results against online scams including romance fraud, investment fraud, and money laundering, with 5,500 plus arrests and over $400 million seized. The operation involved 40 countries and territories across Asia-Pacific, including China, Hong Kong, India, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, South Korea, Thailand, and Vietnam. It ran for several months with coordinated enforcement actions timed to prevent criminals from warning associates in other countries. Romance fraud represented a significant focus, particularly pig butchering scams combining romance deception with fake investment platforms. These schemes had become increasingly prevalent in Asia, with victims losing enormous sums, often hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, to criminals who first established emotional connections before introducing fraudulent investment opportunities. China reported the highest number of arrests with 1,847 suspects detained. Chinese authorities targeted both romance fraud perpetrators and criminal organizations operating illegal payment platforms and underground banks facilitating money laundering. The Public Security Bureau coordinated operations across multiple provinces, revealing the extensive nature of fraud operations within China. Southeast Asian countries made significant contributions. Malaysia arrested 627 individuals involved in various financial frauds, including romance scams. Thailand arrested 489 suspects, revealing that some operations involved human trafficking victims forced to perpetrate romance frauds against their will. Philippines authorities arrested 412 individuals operating from cyber centers in Manila and Cebu. The human trafficking element was particularly disturbing. Investigations revealed compounds in Cambodia, Myanmar, and Thailand where trafficked individuals from China, Vietnam, and other countries were forced to operate romance scams and other frauds. Victims were held in debt bondage, beaten if they failed to meet quotas, and prevented from escaping. This added a humanitarian dimension to anti-fraud operations. South Korea arrested 387 suspects, primarily involved in voice phishing and romance fraud targeting elderly victims. Investigations revealed sophisticated operations using spoofed phone numbers, AI voice technology mimicking family members or government officials, and psychological manipulation techniques. Many arrested were young people recruited through social media with promises of easy money. Japan focused on romance fraud targeting its rapidly aging population. Authorities arrested 243 individuals, primarily foreigners operating from within Japan or coordinating with overseas networks. Japanese victims, often elderly women and men seeking companionship, had lost billions of yen to scams. Cultural factors including shame made reporting especially difficult in Japan. The $400 million seizure included diverse assets. Investigators froze bank accounts moments before transfers, seized cryptocurrency wallets, confiscated luxury real estate purchased with fraud proceeds, and impounded luxury vehicles. Some seizures required cooperation between multiple countries as assets were distributed across jurisdictions to complicate recovery. Operation HEACHI also targeted technological infrastructure supporting fraud. Authorities shut down illegal payment platforms, took down fraudulent investment websites, and arrested operators of money laundering services. Technical teams dismantled servers hosting scam operations and seized databases containing victim information and criminal communications. The operation revealed concerning evolution in fraud tactics. Criminals increasingly used legitimate-appearing corporate structures, professional websites, and even registered business entities to add credibility. Some fake investment platforms were technically sophisticated, appearing indistinguishable from legitimate trading platforms. They provided realistic-looking account statements, executed small initial withdrawals to build trust, then vanished when victims attempted large withdrawals. International cooperation proved crucial. When investigators in one country identified funds being transferred to another, real-time communication enabled rapid freezing. The ASEAN Cybercrime Police Network facilitated cooperation between Southeast Asian nations. Interpol's coordination ensured information sharing across all participating countries, enabling investigators to connect seemingly unrelated cases and identify international criminal organizations. Post-operation outcomes included numerous prosecutions. Many arrested individuals faced charges carrying substantial prison sentences. However, prosecution challenges emerged, particularly in cross-border cases where victims resided in different countries than perpetrators. Extradition proceedings were initiated for high-value targets, though these processes often took years. Operation HEACHI demonstrated Asia-Pacific region's commitment to combating financial fraud, while revealing the scale and sophistication of criminal operations. The high arrest numbers and substantial asset seizures represented significant success. Yet the continuing emergence of new fraud operations indicated the need for sustained, long-term efforts rather than one-time crackdowns. The Ghana Connection, major extraditions and prosecutions Ghana, emerged as a central focus of international romance fraud investigations due to its role as a major hub for West African cybercrime operations. The country's willingness to cooperate with international law enforcement, including extraditing nationals to face prosecution abroad, marked a significant shift in global efforts against romance fraud. In August 2025, Ghana extradited 3 nationals to the United States to face federal charges for their roles in an international criminal organization that stole over $100 million from victims through romance scams and business email compromises. This represented one of the largest romance fraud cases prosecuted in U.S. history and demonstrated Ghana's commitment to international cooperation. Isaac Oduro Boateng, 35, was identified as a high-ranking member of the organization, ALLEGEDL, while coordinating multiple teams of fraudsters operating from cyber cafes in Accra. According to U.S. prosecutors, Boateng oversaw at least 50 individual fraudsters who managed hundreds of fake online personas targeting American victims. He allegedly provided training, scripts, stolen photographs, and handled money laundering logistics. Inusa Ahmed, 32, allegedly specialized in business email compromises while also operating romance fraud schemes. Prosecutors claim he targeted small businesses and elderly individuals, using sophisticated social engineering to gain access to email accounts and redirect wire transfers. Ahmed allegedly maintained connections with money mules in the United States who received and forwarded stolen funds. Derek Van Yeboah, 29, was charged with operating a money laundering network that received proceeds from romance fraud and other schemes. He allegedly controlled dozens of bank accounts and cryptocurrency wallets used to receive, convert, and transfer stolen funds. Prosecutors claim Yeboah received a percentage of all funds processed through his network, earning millions of dollars. The extradition process involved extensive negotiations between U.S. and Ghanaian authorities. The U.S. Department of Justice worked closely with Ghana's Attorney General's office to satisfy legal requirements. Ghana's willingness to extradite despite lack of a formal extradition treaty demonstrated the political commitment to addressing cybercrime originating from its territory. The three men were initially arrested in Ghana in March 2025 during coordinated raids, involving Ghanaian police and FBI agents. Authorities seized computers, phones, bank documents, and luxury items purchased with fraud proceeds. The evidence recovered included communications with hundreds of victims, detailed financial records, and photographs of the lavish lifestyles the suspects enjoyed. Following extradition, all three defendants appeared in U.S. District Court, facing multiple charges including wire fraud conspiracy, money laundering conspiracy, aggravated identity thief, and interstate transportation of stolen property. If convicted on all counts, they faced maximum sentences of 20 to 30 years in federal prison. The case revealed the extensive nature of their organization. Evidence showed the group targeted over 800 identified victims in the United States alone, with individual losses ranging from $50,000 to over $2 million. Victims included retired teachers, nurses, small business owners, and elderly widows. Many victims experienced financial ruin, losing retirement savings, homes, and life's work. Prosecutors presented evidence of sophisticated operations. The organization used stolen photographs from U.S. military personnel, creating fake profiles of soldiers deployed overseas. They crafted elaborate stories about needing money for medical emergencies, military leave expenses, or investment opportunities. They employed multiple communication platforms, switching from dating sites to email to text messages to maintain victim engagement. Money laundering methods were complex. Stolen funds were first sent to U.S.-based money mules who received wire transfers or checks. These mules then sent funds via wire transfer to accounts in Ghana, Nigeria, or other West African countries. Some funds were converted to cryptocurrency, purchased gift cards, or used to buy luxury goods later sold for cash. This layering made tracing extremely difficult. The Ghana extradition cases set important precedents. They demonstrated that African nations were willing to cooperate with international prosecution of high-value cybercrime targets. They showed that criminals could no longer assume safety behind international borders. They also highlighted Ghana's evolving position from being viewed as complicit in cybercrime to being an active partner in combating it. Other extradition cases followed. In October 2025, 2 additional Ghanaians were extradited to the United Kingdom to face charges related to romance fraud targeting British victims. In November 2025, Ghana extradited suspects to Canada and Australia. These cases collectively sent powerful messages to would-be fraudsters that international prosecution was increasingly likely. Domestically, Ghana also increased prosecution efforts. Ghanaian courts convicted dozens of romance fraud perpetrators, imposing prison sentences and asset forfeitures. The government launched public awareness campaigns highlighting the consequences of cybercrime and promoting legitimate employment opportunities for young people. However, challenges remain, including inadequate law enforcement resources, corruption, and the powerful economic incentives driving youth toward fraud. Technology and tactics: how scammers operate modern romance fraud operations employ sophisticated technology far beyond simple fake profiles and stolen photographs. Understanding these technological capabilities reveals why even intelligent, cautious individuals become victims, and why law enforcement faces significant challenges in detection and prosecution. Artificial intelligence transformed romance fraud in recent years. AI-generated faces created through generative adversarial networks, GANs, produce photorealistic images of people who don't exist. These faces cannot be identified through reverse image searches, eliminating a key detection method victims previously used. Criminals generate multiple images of the same non-existent person in various settings, creating convincing false identity portfolios. Natural language processing and AI chatbots enable more sophisticated, personalized messaging at scale. Some operations use AI assistants to draft initial messages and responses, which human fraudsters then customize. This allows individual fraudsters to manage relationships with 50 victims simultaneously while maintaining seemingly personal, attentive communication. The AI learns from successful scripts, continuously improving effectiveness. Voice synthesis technology enables criminals to conduct voice calls without revealing their true identity. Modern voice cloning can replicate specific voices from brief audio samples, allowing fraudsters to impersonate real people or create consistent fake voices for their personas. Some use voice changers in real-time calls, adjusting pitch, accent, and other characteristics to match their fake identity's supposed demographics. Deepfake video technology, while computationally intensive, is increasingly used in romance fraud. Criminals can create videos of non-existent people or superimpose faces onto bodies of others. Lower quality deepfakes work for brief video calls where poor connection quality provides plausible excuse for visual artifacts. More sophisticated operations use high-quality deepfakes for pre-recorded videos sent to victims as supposed proof of identity. Fraudsters extensively use virtual private networks, VPNs, and proxy servers to hide their actual locations. By routing internet traffic through servers in multiple countries, they create false digital trails. Some use VPN servers in the countries where victims reside, making it appear they're local when they're actually in West Africa or Southeast Asia. This complicates law enforcement efforts to trace operations. Encrypted messaging platforms like WhatsApp, Telegram, and Signal are preferred communication channels. These platforms provide end-to-end encryption, preventing law enforcement from intercepting messages without accessing devices directly. Criminals frequently change phone numbers and accounts, making surveillance difficult. Some use temporary or burner accounts, communicating briefly before switching to new credentials. Fake investment platforms represent sophisticated technological infrastructure. Criminals create entire websites mimicking legitimate cryptocurrency exchanges, forex trading platforms, or investment services. These sites include functional interfaces showing fake trading activity, account balances, and profit reports. They're designed to appear professional and trustworthy, often including fabricated certifications, testimonials, and market data. Money laundering technology includes cryptocurrency mixing services, tumblers, decentralized finance platforms, and peer-to-peer exchanges enabling anonymous transactions. Criminals convert stolen funds to Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, then use mixing services that combine multiple transactions, making tracing nearly impossible. They may convert through multiple cryptocurrencies before cashing out, creating additional obfuscation layers. Some organizations use customer relationship management, CRM software adapted for fraud operations. These systems track victim interactions, store scripts and templates, manage multiple personas, and coordinate team activities. They enable professional operation management similar to legitimate businesses, with dashboards showing performance metrics, revenue tracking, and victim engagement analytics. Social engineering remains the most powerful tool. Despite technological sophistication, success ultimately depends on psychological manipulation. Fraudsters study victim psychology, cultural differences, and communication patterns. They're trained to identify vulnerability indicators, mentions of loneliness, recent losses, financial discussions, or expressions of low self-worth. They adapt tactics based on victim responses, employing different approaches for different demographics. Counter-surveillance techniques protect operations from detection. Criminals monitor for signs, Victims are becoming suspicious or involving authorities. They use code words and euphemisms in communications that could be monitored. Some employ lookouts watching for law enforcement around physical operation locations. They have emergency protocols for destroying evidence quickly if raids are imminent. Document forgery capabilities enable creating fake identification documents, business registrations, and legal papers, adding credibility to scams. Using Photoshop and other tools, criminals create convincing fake passports, driver's licenses, business licenses, and contracts. These documents are shown to victims as proof of identity or legitimacy, overcoming skepticism. The technical arms race continues. As law enforcement develops better detection capabilities, criminals adopt new technologies and techniques. The democratization of sophisticated technology, AI tools, encryption, cryptocurrency, provides criminals with capabilities previously requiring significant resources. This technological evolution ensures romance fraud will remain a persistent threat requiring continuous adaptation by defenders. Money laundering networks and financial flows. Money laundering is essential to romance fraud operations, converting stolen funds into usable assets while obscuring their criminal origins. Understanding these laundering networks reveals the financial sophistication of modern fraud operations and highlights vulnerabilities law enforcement exploits for disruption. The money laundering process follows classic stages: placement, layering, and integration. Placement involves introducing stolen funds into financial systems, typically through money mules receiving wire transfers, checks, or cryptocurrency. Layering creates complex transaction chains, obscuring original sources through multiple transfers, currency conversions, and jurisdiction changes. Integration converts laundered proceeds into apparently legitimate assets like real estate, businesses, or investments. Money mules are critical to placement. These individuals receive stolen funds in their bank accounts and forward them onward. Some are witting accomplices recruited through criminal networks and compensated with percentages of transferred amounts. Others are unwitting victims recruited through fake job advertisements, promising legitimate work-from-home opportunities as payment processors or financial coordinators. Recruitment of unwitting money mules often occurs through romance fraud itself. Victims who've sent money are sometimes told they can recover losses by receiving and forwarding funds. Desperate to recoup money and trusting the person they believe loves them, they agree. This creates tragic situations where victims become perpetrators facing potential money laundering charges. Witting money mules are often students or young people recruited through social media or dating apps. They're offered easy money, typically 10 to 20% of amounts processed for, allowing their bank accounts to be used. Many don't understand the seriousness of money laundering charges they could face, or the difficulty of claiming ignorance once evidence shows multiple suspicious transactions. International wire transfers through services like Western Union, MoneyGram, and traditional banks move funds from victim countries to criminal headquarters. Fraudsters provide victims with specific transfer details, amounts, recipient names, locations, designed to avoid triggering fraud detection systems. They may request multiple smaller transfers rather than single large amounts, staying below reporting thresholds. Cryptocurrency has become increasingly important for laundering. Stolen funds sent to money mules are converted to Bitcoin, Ethereum, or other cryptocurrencies through exchanges or peer-to-peer platforms. Cryptocurrencies offer pseudonymity and can be transferred internationally without traditional banking oversight. Criminals use mixing services, tumblers, combining multiple transactions, making tracing extremely difficult. Some operations use decentralized finance, DeFi platforms, and non-custodial exchanges, enabling cryptocurrency transactions without identity verification. These platforms, while created for legitimate purposes, are exploited by criminals seeking to avoid Know Your Customer (KYC) requirements that traditional exchanges impose. Criminal funds move through multiple DeFi platforms and different cryptocurrencies before being cashed out. Trade-based money laundering involves using international commerce to disguise fund transfers. Criminals over-invoice or under-invoice goods in international transactions, with the invoice discrepancy representing laundered funds. For example, goods worth $10,000 might be invoiced at $100,000, with the extra $90,000 representing fraud proceeds legitimized through fake commercial transactions. Real estate is a classic laundering vehicle. Criminals purchase properties through shell companies or nominee owners hiding true beneficial ownership. They may buy properties in cash, avoiding financial institution scrutiny. High-value real estate in major cities offers opportunities to launder large sums through single transactions. Properties can be held, generating legitimate rental income, or sold later, fully integrating criminal proceeds. Luxury goods purchases serve both laundering and consumption purposes. Criminals buy high-end watches, jewelry, vehicles, and art with cash or wired funds. These items can be enjoyed immediately while retaining value for future sale. Some luxury goods are exported and sold internationally, creating additional transaction layers. Jewelers and luxury retailers often lack robust anti-money laundering controls, making them vulnerable to exploitation. Establishing seemingly legitimate businesses enables sophisticated integration. Criminals create import-export companies, currency exchanges, check cashing businesses, or cash-intensive operations like restaurants or car washes. These businesses provide covers for laundering, mixing criminal proceeds with legitimate revenue. They also provide employment for organization members and generate legitimate income streams. Underground banking systems, particularly hawala networks common in South Asia and Middle East, enable informal fund transfers without traditional banking. Hawala operates on trust and reciprocal relationships, with brokers in different countries balancing accounts through legitimate business transactions or direct cash settlements. These systems are difficult for law enforcement to penetrate due to lack of written records and cultural insularity. Professional money laundering services have emerged as specialized criminal enterprises. These organizations don't commit fraud themselves, but provide laundering services to various criminal groups including romance fraudsters, drug traffickers, and other organized crime. They charge percentages of laundered amounts and specialize in moving large sums complex international networks. Through detection challenges are substantial. Financial institutions must balance fraud prevention with customer service, avoiding excessive false positives that frustrate legitimate users. Criminals constantly adapt, learning what triggers alerts and modifying tactics accordingly. International transactions complicate detection as different countries have varying reporting requirements and oversight levels. Law enforcement response includes enhanced international cooperation on financial intelligence. Organizations like Interpol, Europol, and national financial intelligence units share information about suspicious transactions. The Financial Action Task Force, FATF, sets international standards for anti-money laundering. Interpol's iGrip system enables rapid freezing of accounts worldwide before funds disappear. Seizure and asset forfeiture provide both justice and resource recovery. When law enforcement identifies laundered assets, they initiate legal proceedings to seize properties, vehicles, bank accounts, and other items purchased with criminal proceeds. Some jurisdictions allow civil asset forfeiture, requiring only proof that assets are proceeds of crime rather than criminal convictions. Seized assets are sometimes returned to victims or used to fund law enforcement operations. Victim stories: the devastating human cost. Behind statistics about billions in losses and millions of victims are real people whose lives have been devastated by romance fraud. These stories illustrate the profound personal impact and help explain why comprehensive victim support must be central to anti-fraud efforts. Margaret, 68, from Ohio, lost her entire retirement savings of $743,000 to a romance scam over 18 months. After her husband died from cancer, she joined a dating website seeking companionship. She connected with someone presenting himself as a widowed engineer, working overseas. Over months, they communicated daily, discussing shared interests and future plans together. When he claimed he needed funds for a business emergency, she wired money without hesitation. Additional requests followed: medical bills, legal fees, investment opportunities. Each time, he provided plausible explanations and profuse gratitude. By the time Margaret's daughter discovered the fraud, Margaret had liquidated her retirement accounts, taken out a reverse mortgage on her home, and borrowed from friends. She now lives with her daughter, unable to afford independent living, and suffers from severe depression. James, 56, a successful attorney from London, lost over £380,000 to a pig butchering scam. He connected on a dating app with someone who eventually introduced him to cryptocurrency investment opportunities. Initial small investments showed impressive returns, visible on a professional-looking trading platform. Encouraged by apparent success, James invested larger amounts, eventually liquidating investment accounts and borrowing against his home. When he attempted to withdraw funds to pay taxes on his supposed profits, the platform became inaccessible, and his supposed romantic partner vanished. Beyond financial devastation, James's legal career suffered as news of the fraud affected his professional reputation. He sought therapy for severe anxiety and depression. Sarah, 42, a nurse from Sydney, lost Audu $215,000 and faced criminal charges as an unwitting money mule. After losing Audu $85,000 to a romance scam, her supposed boyfriend offered a way to recover her money, receiving and forwarding funds as part of his business operations. Desperate to recoup losses, Sarah agreed, receiving and transferring over Audu $400,000 through her accounts over several months. When arrested, she faced money laundering charges. Though eventually not prosecuted after cooperating with authorities, Sarah's nursing license was suspended. She accrued substantial legal costs, and she suffered severe PTSD from both the initial victimization and subsequent criminal investigation. Robert, 71, a retired teacher from Florida, lost $420,000 and later attempted suicide. His wife had passed away 2 years earlier, and he was profoundly lonely. The scammer, posing as a younger woman who supposedly provided constant attention and affection. Robert had never received such validation and became emotionally dependent. He sent money for various emergencies, even after his children expressed concerns. When he finally accepted he'd been scammed, the shame and depression became overwhelming. His suicide attempt was discovered by his son, who found him after Robert didn't answer phones for 2 days. Robert now lives in assisted living, his finances depleted and his will to live diminished. Linda and Michael, a couple in their 60s from Canada, collectively lost CAD $380,000 to separate scammers who were actually part of the same organization. Both were independently targeted through different platforms, with scammers studying their social media to craft specifically appealing personas. Neither knew the other was being scammed until both needed to access their shared retirement account for separate supposed emergencies. When they discovered they'd both been victimized, the double betrayal devastated them. Their marriage suffered severe strain, with each blaming the other for not recognizing the scams. They're now in financial counseling and couples therapy, trying to rebuild their relationship and finances. Jennifer, 35, a single mother from Texas, lost $67,000, her college savings for her 2 children. The scammer posed as a military service member deployed overseas, using stolen photographs of a real soldier. Jennifer, who came from a military family, was particularly susceptible to this persona. The scammer knew military jargon and created elaborate stories about deployment challenges. Jennifer, working 2 jobs to support her children, sent money she could not afford to lose, believing she was helping someone who would eventually come home to build a life with her and her children. Discovery of the fraud occurred when she contacted the military to inquire about homecoming details and learned the real person in the photographs had never communicated with her. Her children's educational futures were compromised, compounding Jennifer's emotional devastation with crushing guilt. David, 58, from Germany, lost €290,000 and faced public humiliation when his case became local news. A respected community member and business owner, David's victimization became known when police investigated after he reported the fraud. Local media published his story, supposedly to warn others, but the coverage was sensationalistic and included his photograph and business name. He faced ridicule from neighbors and professional consequences as some business relationships suffered. The public shame exacerbated the trauma, leading David to relocate to another city to escape constant reminders. Deborah, 49, from the UK, lost £142,000 and experienced severe PTSD requiring hospitalization. After months of intensive emotional manipulation by her scammer, discovery of the fraud triggered a psychological crisis. She experienced flashbacks, panic attacks, and severe trust issues affecting all relationships. She became unable to work as a teacher due to anxiety and underwent extensive psychiatric treatment. Her case illustrated that psychological damage can sometimes exceed financial losses, requiring comprehensive mental health support for victims. Thomas, 66, from California, lost $890,000, the largest single loss from one victim documented in recent operations. A lonely widower with substantial wealth, Thomas was targeted by a sophisticated operation employing multiple personas, creating a fake support network. Over 2 years, he sent money to several fake identities, believing he was helping various people he cared about, not realizing they were all the same criminal organization. When his financial advisor discovered the suspicious transfers, Thomas was on the verge of losing his home. The case demonstrated how organized operations could systematically extract enormous sums from isolated wealthy victims. These stories represent millions of similar cases worldwide. Common themes emerge: profound loneliness and vulnerability, sophisticated psychological manipulation, gradual escalation of commitment making withdrawal difficult, shame preventing early reporting, and long-term psychological trauma often exceeding financial damage. They illustrate why victim blaming is not only cruel but counterproductive. These are not foolish people, but rather normal individuals exploited by professional criminals using refined techniques. Comprehensive responses must include victim support services providing counseling, financial assistance, peer support, and pathways to recovery that address both financial and psychological dimensions of victimization. Cooperation and investigation techniques. Combating transnational romance fraud requires unprecedented international cooperation and sophisticated investigation techniques. This chapter examines how law enforcement agencies worldwide have collaborated and the methods they've employed to identify, track, and prosecute criminals. Interpol's role has been central. The organization facilitates information sharing between member countries, coordinates multinational operations, and provides specialized support for cybercrime investigations. Interpol's Financial Crimes Unit established the African Joint Operation Against Cybercrime (AFJOC) in 2021, bringing together 19 African nations to address cybercrime originating from the continent. FJOC meets regularly to share intelligence, coordinate operations, and develop joint strategies. The Global Rapid Intervention of Payments (IGRIP) mechanism developed by Interpol enables rapid freezing of bank accounts internationally. When investigators identify accounts receiving fraud proceeds, they submit requests through IGRIP to freeze funds before they're transferred onward. The system facilitates real-time communication between financial intelligence units, enabling intervention within hours rather than days or weeks required through traditional mutual legal assistance. Europol coordinates European response through its European Cybercrime Center, EC3. The center brings together specialists from member states, facilitates joint investigation teams, and provides technical support for complex cases. Europol maintains databases of cybercrime intelligence accessible to participating nations, enabling investigators to identify connections between seemingly separate cases. Bilateral cooperation agreements between specific countries enable enhanced collaboration. The United States has agreements with Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and other African nations facilitating information sharing and coordinated operations. The FBI maintains legal attach offices in major cities worldwide, embedding agents who work directly with host country law enforcement. These attaches provide crucial links between domestic investigations and international operations. Joint investigation teams, JITS, bring together investigators from multiple countries working single cases. These teams share intelligence in real time, coordinate investigative activities, and facilitate evidence sharing admissible in courts of all participating nations. JITs have proven particularly effective for complex romance fraud cases involving victims in multiple countries, criminal operations spanning continents, and money laundering through numerous jurisdictions. Digital forensics provides crucial evidence. When devices are seized, forensics teams extract data including deleted messages, photographs, financial records, and communications. They recover chat histories showing communications with victims, scripts and templates used in fraud operations, financial spreadsheets tracking earnings, and connections to other criminal organization members. Modern forensics can even recover data from damaged or partially destroyed devices. Financial intelligence analysis traces money flows through complex laundering networks. Investigators work with financial intelligence units (FIUs), accessing bank transaction data, wire transfer records, cryptocurrency blockchain analysis, and suspicious activity reports filed by financial institutions. By following the money, investigators identify money mules, laundering facilitators, and ultimately criminal leadership. Undercover operations involve law enforcement posing as victims or criminal associates. Agents create profiles on dating sites and wait for contact from fraudsters. Once approached, they engage in communications, gathering evidence about criminal techniques, organization structure, and individual identities. Some undercover operations involve agents posing as money mules or money laundering service providers, infiltrating criminal networks to gather intelligence. Cryptocurrency tracing has become increasingly sophisticated. While cryptocurrencies were initially viewed as untraceable, blockchain analysis tools now enable following funds through complex transaction patterns. Investigators identify when cryptocurrency is converted to traditional currency through exchanges requiring identity verification. They also monitor darknet markets and other platforms where criminals exchange cryptocurrency for goods or services, creating opportunities for identification. Social media intelligence gathering provides valuable information. Many criminals post about their lifestyles on social media, flaunting wealth and status. Investigators monitor these posts, identifying individuals displaying wealth inconsistent with legitimate income. Some criminals make operational security mistakes on social media, revealing locations, associates, or activities linking them to fraud operations. Victim cooperation is essential but challenging. Many victims are reluctant to report fraud due to shame or embarrassment. Law enforcement agencies have developed victim-centered approaches emphasizing that victims are not at fault and ensuring sensitivity in interviews. Victim testimony provides crucial evidence, but many victims experience psychological difficulty recounting their victimization, requiring specialized interviewing techniques. International legal assistance involves formal requests between nations for evidence gathering, witness interviews, or suspect arrests. These requests follow mutual legal assistance treaties, MLATs, establishing frameworks for cooperation. However, MLAT processes are often slow, sometimes taking years to fulfill requests. This delay enables criminals to move, destroy evidence, or continue operations, highlighting the need for faster mechanisms like iGrip. Extradition proceedings enable bringing suspects to countries where victims reside for prosecution. Extradition requires demonstrating that alleged crimes are criminal in both requesting and requested countries, dual criminality, providing sufficient evidence, and following proper legal procedures. Some countries refuse to extradite their nationals, requiring prosecution in the country where criminals reside, even when victims are elsewhere. Capacity building in source countries is increasingly prioritized. Rather than only pursuing criminals after crimes occur, international community invests in strengthening law enforcement capabilities in countries where fraud operations concentrate. This includes training, equipment, technical assistance, and support for anti-corruption efforts. The goal is enabling countries to combat cybercrime independently, rather than depending on foreign intervention. Private sector cooperation is essential. Technology companies, financial institutions, and cryptocurrency exchanges possess information crucial to investigations. Most cooperate with lawful requests, though response times and willingness vary. Some jurisdictions require these entities to proactively monitor for fraud and report suspicious activities, while others rely on reactive responses to specific law enforcement requests. Enhanced private sector cooperation could significantly improve investigation effectiveness. Prosecutions, sentencing, and asset recovery following arrests and investigations. Prosecution phases determine whether criminals face meaningful consequences. This chapter examines the legal proceedings, sentencing outcomes, and efforts to recover stolen assets and provide victim restitution. Prosecution strategies vary by jurisdiction. In the United States, romance fraud typically charged under federal wire fraud statutes carrying maximum 20-year sentences. Prosecutors often include additional charges like money laundering, 20 years, aggravated identity theft, mandatory 2 years consecutive, and interstate transportation of stolen property, 10 years. By stacking charges, prosecutors achieve significant potential sentences, providing plea bargaining leverage. In the Ghana extradition cases, the 3 defendants faced multiple counts each. Isaac Oduro Boateng was charged with 47 counts of wire fraud, 8 counts of money laundering, and 12 counts of aggravated identity theft. If convicted on all counts, he faced over 80 years imprisonment. Musa Ahmed faced 39 wire fraud counts, 6 money laundering counts, and 9 identity theft counts. Derek Van Yeboah faced 52 money laundering counts and 6 wire fraud conspiracy counts. As of early 2026, these cases remain pending. All 3 defendants pleaded not guilty and retained counsel. Plea negotiations were reportedly underway, with prosecutors offering reduced sentences in exchange for guilty pleas and cooperation against other organization members. The cases highlighted prosecution timeline challenges. Extradition occurred in August 2025, but trials likely wouldn't occur until late 2026 or 2027 due to case complexity and court backlogs. United Kingdom prosecutions followed similar patterns. In November 2024, a London court sentenced 3 individuals to combined 19 years imprisonment for money laundering related to romance fraud. The primary defendant, who operated money mule recruitment networks, received 8 years. His 2 accomplices received 6 and 5 years respectively. The court also ordered asset forfeiture of £2.4 million, $3 million, though actual recovery was limited as much had been spent or transferred overseas. European Union member states increasingly use confiscation orders under EU regulations, enabling seizure of assets located in any member country. A German defendant convicted of romance fraud in 2024 faced asset seizure across Germany, Spain, and Cyprus, where he had purchased properties with fraud proceeds. Total confiscation exceeded €1.8 million, though execution required years of legal proceedings across 3 jurisdictions. Sentencing disparities between jurisdictions create challenges. A defendant prosecuted in the United States might face 10 to 20-year sentences, while the same offense prosecuted in many African countries might yield 2 to 5 years. This disparity influences where prosecutions occur and affects deterrent value. Some argue for sentencing harmonization through international frameworks, though others cite sovereignty concerns. In West African countries, domestic prosecutions increased following international pressure and capacity building. Ghana's Cybercrime Act of 2024 strengthened penalties for electronic fraud, with maximum sentences increased from 5 to 15 years. In 2025, Ghanaian courts sentenced 47 individuals under the new law, with sentences ranging from 3 to 12 years. However, enforcement remains inconsistent, with some courts imposing lenient sentences despite severe statutory maximums. Nigerian prosecutions by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, resulted in hundreds of convictions annually. EFCC statistics showed 387 cybercrime convictions in 2024, with average sentences of 4.3 years. However, conviction rates remain low relative to arrests, with many cases dismissed due to insufficient evidence, procedural errors, or corruption. EFCC leadership acknowledged ongoing challenges, including inadequate forensic aid. Prosecutions varied significantly by country. Japan imposed relatively harsh sentences, capabilities, and judicial corruption, with romance fraud perpetrators receiving 5 to 10-year sentences. South Korea also imposed substantial sentences, averaging 6 to 8 years for organized fraud operations. However, Southeast Asian nations often impose lighter sentences, with some defendants receiving probation or short jail terms even for frauds involving substantial victim losses. Asset recovery is crucial for victim restitution, but faces substantial challenges. Even when assets are identified and seizure orders obtained, actual recovery is difficult. By the time prosecution occurs, defendants often have spent proceeds or transferred them to family members or associates beyond legal reach. Properties purchased with fraud proceeds may have been sold to innocent third parties, complicating recovery. Cryptocurrency poses particular challenges, as assets can be moved quickly and anonymously. Victim restitution orders require defendants to repay victims as part of sentencing. Courts calculate total victim losses and order restitution accordingly. However, most defendants lack means to pay substantial restitution. In the U.S. system, restitution becomes long-term obligations, with defendants making payments during and after incarceration. In practice, most victims recover little or nothing through restitution orders. Asset forfeiture programs aim to seize criminal proceeds for victim compensation funds. The U.S. Department of Justice maintains a victims' compensation fund receiving portions of seized assets. Similar programs exist in the UK, Canada, Australia, and some European nations. However, these programs provide only partial compensation, typically covering small percentages of losses. Distribution also takes years, with victims waiting extensive periods for minimal payments. Civil lawsuits provide alternative recovery mechanisms. Victims can sue defendants in civil courts seeking damages, typically easier to prove than criminal cases requiring lower evidentiary standards. However, civil judgments face the same collection challenges as criminal restitution. Additionally, most defendants lack attachable assets, making civil suits impractical for many victims. Some victims successfully sued third parties including money transfer services, banks, or platforms where fraud occurred, alleging negligence in fraud prevention. These lawsuits achieved mixed results. Some companies settled to avoid litigation costs and negative publicity. Others successfully defended, arguing they had adequate safeguards and couldn't reasonably detect sophisticated fraud. Courts generally sided with financial institutions absent clear negligence evidence. International asset recovery requires cooperation between nations where assets are located. The Stolen Asset Recovery Initiative, STAR, a World Bank and UN partnership, facilitates asset recovery from corruption and organized crime. However, recovery processes are slow and legally complex. Assets frozen in one country may take years to repatriate to victims in another. Some nations refuse to return seized assets, retaining them for domestic purposes despite international obligations. The economics of asset recovery are sobering. Estimates suggest that globally, less than 5% of romance fraud proceeds are ever recovered. High recovery costs relative to recovered amounts make many cases economically unviable to pursue. This reality means that while prosecution provides justice and deterrence, financial recovery for most victims remains unlikely, emphasizing the importance of prevention over post-facto recovery efforts. Prevention strategies and victim protection, while law enforcement operations achieve important tactical successes, preventing victimization requires comprehensive strategies operating at individual, institutional, and societal levels. This chapter examines prevention approaches and victim protection mechanisms. Individual-level education focuses on awareness and recognition. Programs teach potential targets to recognize warning signs. Individuals claiming to be overseas or unable to meet in person. Premature express ions of love. Conversations quickly moving from platforms to private channels. Requests for money, especially for emergencies or investments. Resistance to video calls or suspicious behavior during calls. And stories that seem too perfect or coincidental. However, simple awareness isn't sufficient. Education must address psychological aspects explaining why intelligent people become victims. Programs should explain emotional manipulation techniques, discuss cognitive biases fraudsters exploit, validate that victimization can happen to anyone, and reduce shame that prevents reporting and recovery. Some programs use testimonial approaches where former victims share experiences, providing powerful learning through real stories. Family and community involvement in prevention is valuable. Programs encourage open communication about online relationships, warning signs that concern family members, and creating non-judgmental environments where individuals feel safe discussing concerns. Some families establish agreements about discussing financial decisions before executing them, providing circuit breakers preventing impulsive transfers. Dating platforms bear significant responsibility. Technical implementations can substantially reduce fraud. Identity verification systems requiring government-issued IDs Biometric verification or video verification would make fake profile creation difficult. Machine learning algorithms can detect suspicious messaging patterns, template text, communications with multiple users simultaneously, or escalation patterns toward financial discussions. Some platforms implemented warning systems flagging suspicious behavior. When users exhibit patterns associated with fraud, rapid relationship progression, requests for money, or conversations moving off platform, automated warnings alert users to potential scams. More sophisticated systems might temporarily slow or restrict communications, giving users reflection time. However, platforms face tension between security and user experience, as overly aggressive interventions frustrate legitimate users. Financial institutions provide critical defense layers. Banks and money transfer services can monitor for romance fraud transaction patterns, wire transfers to high-risk countries, multiple transfers to same recipients, transfers following rapid relationship establishment visible and account communications if monitored. Enhanced monitoring might flag accounts where users suddenly make uncharacteristic large transfers or deplete savings quickly. Interventions by financial institutions require careful implementation. Some banks now require customers seeking to make large international wire transfers to have brief conversations with fraud specialists. These conversations don't prevent transfers, but provide informed decision-making opportunities. Specialists explain common fraud scenarios and ask whether customers recognize these patterns in their situations. Many customers abort transfers after these conversations, realizing they're being scammed. Regulatory frameworks could mandate enhanced fraud prevention. Some jurisdictions consider requiring dating platforms to implement identity verification or maintain specific security standards. Others consider requiring financial institutions to flag and delay suspicious transactions. However, regulatory approaches face challenges including industry resistance, compliance costs, cross-border enforcement difficulties, and balancing security with legitimate user privacy and autonomy. Government-funded awareness campaigns raise public consciousness. Campaigns use television, radio, social media, and print advertising warning about romance fraud. Effective campaigns avoid victim-blaming language, emphasize that fraud can affect anyone, provide specific warning signs and protective behaviors, and direct people to resources for reporting and assistance. Some campaigns target specific demographics particularly vulnerable: elderly individuals, recently divorced or widowed, people expressing loneliness online. School and university education about online safety should include romance fraud. Younger individuals increasingly use dating apps and social media for relationships, making them potential targets. Educational curricula should cover recognizing manipulation, understanding why fraud tactics work, protecting personal information online, and verifying identities before trusting strangers online. This education should begin in teenage years when many begin using social platforms. Victim support services are essential not just for those already victimized, but preventing ongoing harm. Comprehensive services should include hotlines providing immediate crisis support and guidance, free counseling specializing in fraud-related trauma, peer support, groups connecting victims with others having similar experiences, financial counseling helping navigate bankruptcy or debt, legal assistance pursuing civil remedies or defending against money mule charges, and assistance reporting to law enforcement with sensitivity to victim trauma. Currently, most countries lack adequate victim support infrastructure. Victims are often left navigating complex reporting processes alone, dealing with psychological trauma without specialized help, and facing financial ruin without guidance. Investment in victim services is not just humanitarian but practical. Supported victims are more likely to report crimes, cooperate with investigations, and recover psychologically. Research and data collection provide evidence bases for effective prevention. Systematic studies should examine what prevention messages work for different demographics, which platform security features most effectively reduce fraud, how financial institution interventions affect fraud rates versus customer satisfaction, and what victim characteristics predict vulnerability, enabling targeted prevention. Unfortunately, inadequate research funding means many questions remain unanswered, limiting evidence-based policy development. Public-private partnerships leverage diverse capabilities. Collaborations between law, Enforcement, technology companies, financial institutions, researchers, and victim advocates enable information sharing within appropriate privacy frameworks. Joint education campaigns reaching broader audiences. Coordinated responses disrupting fraud more comprehensively, and pooled resources making large-scale prevention possible. Cultural change is perhaps the most fundamental need. Romance fraud thrives partly because victim-blaming cultures make reporting difficult. Changing narratives from "how could they be so stupid?" to "these are sophisticated crimes," exploiting universal human needs reduces shame, enabling earlier reporting and intervention. Media coverage should avoid sensationalizing or ridiculing victims, instead highlighting criminal sophistication and systemic factors enabling fraud. Ultimately, prevention requires recognizing that no single approach suffices. Individual education, platform protections, financial institution monitoring, law enforcement action, and victim support must work synergistically. Success requires sustained commitment from governments, private sector, and civil society, adequately resourced and continuously adapted as fraud tactics evolve. The goal isn't eliminating romance fraud entirely, likely impossible, given human psychology and technological capabilities, but reducing incidents, minimizing individual losses, and supporting those victimized. Conclusion and future outlook: international operations against romance fraud networks achieve significant tactical successes. Thousands arrested, hundreds of millions seized, major organizations disrupted. However, these victories must be understood within broader context of evolving global threats continuing to adapt, expand, and inflict enormous harm worldwide. Several trends suggest romance fraud will remain significant. Fundamental drivers show no signs of diminishing: economic inequality, technological connectivity, human loneliness, and prosecution difficulties. Some factors intensify. Widening wealth inequality creates larger, economically desperate populations. Aging demographics in developed nations create growing vulnerable populations. And technological advances provide criminals with increasingly sophisticated tools. Artificial intelligence will continue transforming operations. Future developments might include AI conducting entire conversations with minimal human oversight, managing hundreds of victim relationships per operator, deepfake technology becoming indistinguishable from reality, making video verification meaningless, and voice cloning enabling real-time phone conversations. Each advancement makes detection more difficult and victimization more convincing. Cryptocurrency and decentralized finance provide evolving money laundering opportunities. As traditional financial oversight improves, criminals shift to systems designed to avoid centralized control. Future developments in privacy coins, decentralized exchanges, and cross-chain transactions could make tracing proceeds even more difficult than current challenges. International law enforcement cooperation, while improving, faces structural challenges. Legal system differences, jurisdictional boundaries, resource constraints, corruption in some countries, and political considerations impede seamless cooperation. Recent extradition successes represent progress, but many countries remain reluctant or lack frameworks for effective extradition. Comprehensive prevention requires operating at multiple levels. Individual education must move beyond simplistic warnings to address sophisticated psychological manipulation and universal vulnerability. Dating platforms and social media companies must implement stronger identity verification, suspicious activity detection, and user protection. Financial institutions must enhance monitoring and intervention for suspicious transactions. Government responses must include adequate cybercrime unit resourcing, specialized romance fraud teams, international cooperation frameworks, victim support services, and legislative reforms ensuring appropriate penalties and civil remedies. Some jurisdictions began implementing these measures, but many lack political will or resources for adequate prioritization. Victim support represents crucial but often overlooked aspects. Current systems provide minimal assistance. Comprehensive support should include free trauma counseling, peer support groups, financial counseling navigating bankruptcy, legal assistance pursuing remedies, and elimination of victim-blaming narratives increasing psychological harm. Research needs improvement. Current understanding relies on reported cases, but underreporting means scope, patterns and impacts remain poorly understood. Systematic research should examine psychological vulnerability mechanisms, risk factors, long-term impacts, prevention strategy effectiveness, and criminal organization evolution. Public-private partnerships offer promising approaches. Collaborations between law enforcement, technology companies, financial institutions, researchers, and advocates can leverage diverse expertise, enable information sharing, conduct joint education campaigns, and coordinate comprehensive responses. Operations examined: Contender, First Light, HEACHI demonstrate what coordinated law enforcement achieves. Thousands arrested, hundreds of millions seized, countless potential victims protected. These successes should be celebrated while acknowledging limitations. Networks proved resilient, with new operations emerging as existing ones are dismantled. Addressing the epidemic requires recognizing it as a complex social issue intersecting with economic inequality, technological change, demographic shifts, and human psychology. Solutions must be correspondingly comprehensive, addressing root causes while pursuing tactical disruption. Victims: vulnerable individuals exploited by criminals preying on desires for love and companionship, deserve both justice and protection. Moving forward, lessons from operations should inform future efforts. Success requires sustained commitment, adequate resources, international cooperation, technological innovation, and above all, recognition that behind statistics are real people whose lives have been devastated. Only through comprehensive, coordinated responses can we meaningfully reduce the terrible toll romance fraud inflicts globally. The fight continues. New victims are targeted daily, new scams launched, and new criminal networks formed. International law enforcement, supported by governments, technology companies, financial institutions, and civil society, must remain vigilant and committed to protecting vulnerable populations. The human cost of failure is too great to accept. While complete elimination is unrealistic, substantial reduction through coordinated comprehensive efforts is achievable and morally imperative.